Hello, I'm Ciara Daly, and this is Unite and Conquer, a new online series exploring the ways in which the Irish food and drink industry can positively impact people, planet, and profit. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be speaking with experts from all facets of the industry as we cover a broad range of topics from food education to business strategy to those all important communications, all while highlighting the various opportunities which exist for food and drink businesses to implement green skills throughout their systems. Now, joining me today for my first ever episode of Unite and Conquer is Jacinta Dalton, Head of Culinary Arts and Service Industries at ATU Galway. Jacinta has over 20 years of senior management experience from her time working in the food and hospitality industry and has developed and delivered a number of training programs for Fudge Ireland. She enters her seventh year as board member of the IGCAT, an association of experts from gastronomy, culture, arts, and tourism who have an interest in supporting local development and taking an holistic view to solving sustainable development challenges. And in 2019, she was named Food Champion of the Wild Atlantic Way by Fáilte Ireland. So if ever there was a woman qualified to help me kick the series off, it certainly is. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi, Ciara. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm delighted to be the first lady on the stream. So thank
The
you.
first lady of Unite and Conquer. I like it. You're like my Michelle Obama.
Yeah, well now.
I'm setting myself up for failure by comparing myself to Barack Obama. But listen, Jacinta, I know you're a busy woman, so I'm going to get straight into it with you. Um, from that resume, you are obviously someone who's very involved in the Irish food and drink industry. But before we get into the meat of exactly what it is that you do now, I want to just get a little idea of the backstory of how you actually got involved with the industry itself.
Sure. I suppose it's in my DNA somewhat, Ciara, because I grew up in Oughterard, in County Galway, which is obviously a well-known tourist destination, the gateway to Connemara, so to speak. And my mum had a B&B in Oughterard, so we were always, I suppose, invested in tourism and welcoming people to our home, and so on. We were kind of an early an early Airbnb, so as somewhat. I then, I suppose, in my teens, I worked in the fabulous Carriva House, which is still a wonderful destination hotel in the Blue Book, in Oughterard also. And I started at washing dishes and worked my way. I did food service and so on. And then I kind of always had a grow to work in the industry. And despite my mother trying to sway me down other routes, I nearly was a home economics teacher. And I said, no, I'll never teach. And lo and behold, I ended up in education. But there you go, such is life. So I studied hotel management, and that was I won't say how many years ago, but a while ago. And I suppose from there, and actually I studied it in what was the RTC back then, which is now celebrating 50 years of food and tourism education, which is wonderful to be still part of that journey. So I worked overseas. I worked in Germany. I worked did a stint in Switzerland. I worked in America for a number of years. I came back, and I suppose I worked in Ireland in a number of different fields. I worked in workplace catering, which was called industrial catering back then. And I learned so much in that field, because often that particular game gets a bad rep in terms of,
Mhm.
it's not innovative and whatever. It's probably one of the most innovative sectors out there, actually, because um, they have to work within very tight budgets, but also be sustainable and manage food waste and so on. And they're actually here in Ireland still leading the way in many ways. Um, I had my own business for a while. I did that for a few
Amazing.
years, and just, I suppose, at the start of the Celtic Tiger, things weren't great, and I became self-employed in a different field. I suppose I had my daughter at that stage, and I wanted to do something a little more in the training and education side. So I started to work for myself in that field, and I did a lot of consultancy for SMEs in particular. And then I started to do a lot of contract work with Fáilte Ireland,
Mhm.
around developing training programs for SMEs, and particularly looking at food and how Irish food was being embraced, in industry and for the tourist facing outward. So what were we doing? So this is going back maybe 10, 12, 15 years actually, where we were on a quest back then with Fulch Ireland to try and raise the profile of Irish food abroad. And there were a number of us around the country on this journey with Fulch Ireland, and that's where the food champion journey, I suppose, began. And that was
Yeah.
wonderful because we were dotted all the way around Ireland in key locations, and so we built this fabulous network of wonderful people, all of whom had, I suppose, the same ethos around food and wanting Irish food to be, you know, talked about internationally and so on. So that was wonderful. And then I suppose I did that for a number of years, and then the opportunity came up. I bumped into an old lecturer of mine in SuperValue one day, and
No.
she was retiring at the time. She says, "Yeah, you should put your name in the hat there for a job." And I said, "No way! I didn't never wanted to teach." But I said, "Sure, Charles, put in the CV," and lo and behold, I started work in what was then GMIT in 2010. I started working as a lecturer
Amazing.
in food and beverage and marketing and so on at that time. So I then, I suppose, this job, head of department, came up in 2017, and I was appointed into that post, and that's where I now rest. But I suppose, although my job is based here, I suppose I'm still very involved in any food event that happens
Yeah.
outside of the university, because I think it's so important for those of us that are in education. We obviously have very privileged positions in that we're working with young people and mature learners, and we have the opportunity to influence and guide. And I just think that's an amazing privilege. But in
Yeah.
order to be a good educator, I think you have to be very invested in what's happening in industry and understand it and understand the challenges that exist.
Yeah.
So that's something that's very close to my heart, I guess.
That's brilliant. It's so nice to kind of hear that journey because it's something I really find that whenever you meet someone within the industry, they always have this really kind of colorful path of how they got to where they are now. And it's sort of like this hole that swallows you up. It's like once you come into the food and drink industry, if you have a real grow for it, you're never going to get out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%.
Even though
You
sometimes
know,
you're like, let me out.
yeah. And
So,
it is, and it's
so
it's kind of that's something that we're trying to get across to young people nowadays.
yeah,
The food industry is still not being promoted in the manner
yeah,
that it should be promoted at school. I suppose it's often like we go in to visit schools all the time from ATU, and we try and educate students about the wonderful career opportunities that do exist in the
hmm,
broader food industry. And when I say the broader food industry, I'm talking hospitality, tourism, food product development, and so on. There's so many different pathways, but I suppose it's very difficult to get a 16 or 17-year-old to understand that, and you have to, I suppose, let them know that there are so many different pathways. It's not a
yeah,
one-dimensional industry.
yeah.
So there are many different facets to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really complex. And I think once you're in that, you understand and you can see how like vibrant and fun and rewarding it can be. But I guess when you're on the outside looking in, it's not always as clear. Um,
No.
so through your past experiences, you've obviously highlighted a really kind of interesting career path there. And now your role at ATU, you're at this really interesting crossroads where you understand where the industry has come from and where it has the potential to go next. And so
Mhm.
something that's really important, the entire kind of being of this podcast is looking at the role that the industry can play in kind of protecting the environment and protecting people. And the ESSD, which is this international research journal, they estimate that food systems contribute to more than a third of greenhouse gases causing the climate crisis. And then consequently, the pressure from the climate crisis is putting the pressure that the climate crisis is putting on food production means that the industry itself is becoming trapped in this vicious cycle where extreme weather events pose the threat of food shortages. And this can sometimes feel like it's something away, like not happening on our doorstep. But just last week, I heard Maria Flynn from Ballinbeckenny Potatoes talking about the difficulties that she is having this year with harvesting their potatoes, this product, this food that we are so used to having on our tables here in Ireland. So it's, you know, it is something that is extremely serious and that we do need to do something about. And then you have, you know, food education is the very basis of where we can start making an impact when it comes to protecting and improving our food system. So, what I wanted to ask you about is how is that something that ATU are educating students on?
Okay, so you're absolutely right insofar as food education is where it all starts. And before I speak to you about what we're doing in ATU, I suppose I just take the opportunity because it's something that is so close to my heart, and many
Hmm.
of my peers in industry would feel the same. That our food system is broken. That is a given. It can be fixed, and there are things that we can all do to fix it. But unfortunately, we don't have a cohesive food education program in Ireland that starts in the home, that starts in primary school and so on, and all the way through to secondary school. And unless we have that kind of joined up thinking, a lot of, I suppose, behaviors and attitudes are formed by the time a 17-year-old decides to study, let's say, culinary arts.
Hmm.
Um, we often have to undo a lot of behaviors. We have to change the ethos and so on. And I suppose we're caught at times between a rock and a hard place because I suppose a staffing shortage crisis in Ireland in the hospitality industry. We have done for many years,
Hmm.
um, and it's we don't know when it's going to improve. To be honest with you, but in order for it to improve, the industry has to equally improve. We have to make it an attractive place for young
Absolutely.
people to work in. And not just for young people, we have to make it an attractive place and a rewarding environment for everybody to work in. And when we start talking about sustainability, sustainability isn't just about the environment, it's about self, it's about the people you work with, it's about general health and well-being. And that's something that we have to start looking at if we want to improve the working conditions and so on. And there are so many wonderful places out there that are doing amazing things, and
Hmm.
those are the businesses that we want to work with, and the businesses that we want to promote and support. Um, so I suppose going back to what we do here, I think sometimes. Um, when you start talking about sustainability, it becomes overwhelming for a lot of people.
Hmm.
We turn on our TVs and we talk about the climate crisis. We have an energy crisis. We have so many different elements happening in the environment that are gosh, you'd want to stay under the duvet, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to actually get out there, particularly if you're an SME owner and you're there and
Yeah.
you're juggling. You're the chef, you're the cook, you're the marketer, you're the HR manager. You're all of these things, and you're trying to keep a business open. And then you're kind of going, okay, well,
Hmm.
what are you going to do about sustainability? How am I even going to get going with that? So there are so many things. And what I generally, I suppose, tend to say to SMEs is like, just take a step back and examine everything from, I suppose, your supply chain. Look at the small wins, look at things that you can actually do that make a difference. And here in ATU, we're trying to make changes around that. We have a wonderful new sustainability centre, and right across the ATU, there are changes afoot to become a climate action university. There are
Brilliant.
amazing projects happening at the moment, and we're now trying to, I suppose, capture all that work so that it can, I suppose, come together so that it's communicated outwardly. Um, Within the culinary arts department here, I suppose one of the biggest things that I've been trying to implement for the longest time is tackling the public procurement system in order to ensure that we have local food supply chains and that we build an ethos of farm to fork with our students. I don't know, yeah, anyone that knows me, I suppose, will hear me talking or giving out about the procurement system, because in the public sector, if you're, and when I mean hospitals, schools, prisons, the whole shebang, um, often the impetus is placed on cheap food. Buy cheap
Hmm.
food, keep it within the budget, and buy it from wherever as long as it's cheap.
Yeah.
And that's just the procurement system policy that's in place across the EU. But now there's more green procurement policies coming into play. And so what we're trying to do here is to ensure that we have as many small scale suppliers from a local region, from the region, in place, and that our
Brilliant.
students are starting to learn that, I'm not buying it from a catalogue. I have to build a relationship with the local farmer, with the local veg supplier, and so on. So we're making a strong effort on that front. It's not always easy because of the restrictions that exist, but it's something that's there. Last year in early 22, we redesigned all of our culinary programs, and we have sustainability principles embedded from first year on all the way through. And again, when I say sustainable principles, it again is from procurement right through to health and well-being. And then out the other side, looking at the circular economy around food, food waste, and all of that.
Hmm.
We have a long way to go before we,
Hmm.
really get things where we need them to be, but you have to start somewhere. And I suppose that's the message that I would say to anyone that is feeling overwhelmed by the challenge that sustainability presents, is that,
Yeah.
do little small changes, and small things make a massive difference. And every day try and tackle something new,
Yeah.
because sometimes if you start talking about these massive big changes, it's not going to be easy to do that straight up,
Yeah.
because you're trying to keep your doors open, or you're trying to pay your bills, or so on. So I would just say look at the easy wins. And I think it's something, I suppose, and I can talk to you in a moment about a project that we're working on around sustainability. But I think the biggest challenge at the moment is food businesses are finding it difficult to just be, to just
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
open, and
Definitely.
to pay their bills and so on. That's really unfortunate. And I suppose, but what we're trying to do from a student point of view is try and build that ethos into them, so that when they go out into industry, they can assist businesses, that they have a knowledge there around food and
Yeah.
sustainability and food waste and so on, so that they can add value. um,
Yeah.
and I think, as I said, challenges. Industry want us to create graduates that have technical skills, but we have a responsibility to create graduates that not only have technical skills, but also have a value system within them,
Yeah.
within the food sector for the future.
Yeah, that value system is so important because if you're not kind of implementing them in what you do, that love for what you do can't continue and eventually you
Correct.
burn out. And I think that's probably something we are seeing to some degree with a lot of businesses who've kind of followed this. Anyway, we won't get into that. That's for another day. But
Yes.
that's brilliant to hear. In terms, something you touched on, just in terms of the small changes, just something I would remind small business owners who are feeling that overwhelm about, what are these big things I need to do within the business. I would say by the very nature of you, or by the very step of you trying to implement green changes within your business, that is actually a massive step because you've taken a risk, or but you've taken what you do every single day, how you are making your income, and you have essentially greened that up for you. So that is actually a very big step. That's something I
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
have to always kind of emphasize to business owners. The kind of thinking, oh well, like it's very easy to compare yourself to bigger businesses, but you have to also remember the reality of what is within your wheelhouse. So
Absolutely.
just to kind of to come on, or just to follow on from that point.
No,
So
it's so
you've
true.
mentioned on in terms of the SMEs, the issues that you see them facing. We it's very clear we both work with, closely with businesses within the industry, and we are very familiar with the struggles that they're facing at the moment in terms of implementing those green processes and making them sust- sustainable in the long run for them, or making sure that they stay implemented, that they don't fall to the wayside. Are there any barriers that you are seeing business owners come up against? And if so, have you seen any ways, have you got any advice on how they can overcome those barriers?
Yeah, sure. So we're after just completing a piece of research as part of a European project that we're doing. It's an Erasmus Plus funded project, and we're doing
Brilliant.
that with educational partners in France, Spain, Portugal, and Slovenia. And what we're trying to do is do a comparative report. We've just completed that now, a comparative report around tourism SMEs. And when we say tourism, again, it's restaurants, food and beverage, hospitality, and so on. Um, so we're looking at their attitudes and, what barriers, their challenges they're facing, and so on in that sustainability journey.
Brilliant.
And it's interesting and we'll be publishing this information very soon, but we can see that Slovenia is, miles ahead. They're very much a green country, but they have a lot of investment from their government in
Yeah.
supporting that.
Hmm.
In the Irish context here, so what did we find as part of our research and the sample that we conducted? Some of the barriers that people have identified, business owners predominantly, and the average age group was 45 to 59 that answered this particular question. So these would be fairly established business owners.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest challenge they had was human resources,
Yeah.
not having um, the talent, let's call it that, or enough people in order to even consider anything sustainable or any changes whatsoever. The
Yeah.
cost of living crisis and inflation were also two further barriers that have been identified. And interestingly, 65% of respondents said that they had a sustainability strategy, which is very positive
Hmm.
compared to 40% in some of the other countries.
Okay.
So if 65% of the SMEs that we surveyed said, yes, we are planning, that's really, really positive. But then when you drill down into that and you look at it, again, the reasons they're not, strategy is one thing, it's documented, but being able
Yeah.
to implement it in is
Yeah.
I suppose the next challenge. Um, and again, it's staffing, it's the cost of implementation. So many people have a perception that it's expensive to implement a green strategy in their business.
Hmm.
But I suppose what we're trying to develop as part of this project is a series of tools and toolkits
Yeah.
that are open source training free of charge to SMEs so that they can take this information and utilize it within their businesses to either train their staff themselves, or if they wish for educators to do that for them, that facility is there also. And it's online, it's accessible, it's free. So that information will be there to assist them on that. But what we're saying is that, rather than looking at the big massive picture, sit back and start to document the steps that you can take, almost like journaling for self.
Yeah.
It's almost like journaling for your business. Write 3 goals that you can easily tackle, that's not going to cost you anything more, and that will actually make your business more sustainable. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's like this balance, that's going to cost me more to do it, but in the long term it's actually going to save you money.
Yeah.
And that's the particular thing that we notice when we start looking at the circular food economy. Um, let's start at procurement. Oftentimes, people have menus in place that are too big.
Yeah.
When the menus are too big, and because they're trying to be all things to all people, so they have a little bit of everything on the menu. So when you have a large menu, that means you have to carry a lot of stock. That means you have a lot of money invested in stock that oftentimes is sitting on your shelf,
Yeah.
because your turnover isn't as great as you'd like it to
Keeping up.
be.
Yeah.
Ultimately that ends up in the bin. So you have a twofold cost there. You're paying to buy the stock, and then you're paying to dispose of wastage. So it is an
Yeah.
additional cost. So by making some small changes around menu planning, around procurement, around stock control, around all of these things, it can actually assist in managing your business that little bit better. That will make your business more sustainable in the long term, financially and environmentally.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the key piece. There is so many actions that you can take that actually have an environmental benefit, but a really important financial benefit. And it can
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
hard when you are in that kind of within your business space. But if you can take the time to just come out of it and look into what you've created, you'll actually see those opportunities and the chances for you to make these small but actually significant improvements.
Yeah.
Um, if people want to access these resources, or these reports, how do I know they're not available at the moment, but how and when can they?
Okay, so we'll be publishing that report very shortly through our social media channels, and
Brilliant.
and we have a website which is Eco SME. So if
Okay,
anyone wants to
brilliant.
Google Eco SME, you'll find some of the work that we're doing. Now, with these Erasmus projects, they're generally 2 to 4 years long. So we're into the second year of the project. So we're starting now to develop the training tools. So as and when they become available they will be out there. But we'll
Brilliant.
also be, later on this year, we'll be inviting SMEs to come along to some pilot events so that they
Brilliant.
will help us develop these tools, because we don't want to develop something that's not going to work for
Yeah.
industry. So we would rather if people would participate in these pilots and
Brilliant.
say, no, that doesn't work for me, or that does work for me. So we'll be putting out an open call, inviting people to come along and assist the program development. And again, that's something that I think is really positive about education nowadays. Most educators do look outward and work with industry as best as possible, because that's that's win-win, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So those social media channels, that's the ATU Galway social media channels, is
Yeah, so we
it?
link it to that, but we also have an eco SME
Perfect.
channel through Instagram and so on. But I suppose I would always use my own channels to push, because I have I suppose a food following, and we
Yes,
and
yes.
we all connect and we all know one another. So I'll be sending it out to all of you lovely people and say, here,
Perfect.
please share and use and so on. So eco SME on Instagram, or we'll also share it through ATU's Instagram, or my own JCDAL Instagram as well.
Perfect. Well,
Um,
I'll include the links to all of those so that
yeah,
people can
brilliant,
choose
brilliant.
whichever forum they would like to take the
Yeah.
information.
And we want feedback. I think that's really
Yeah,
important. And I think just to put that out there, we're here. We're at the end of a phone or the end of an email. If anybody, wants to pick up the phone or is interested in finding out more about the programs we offer, about, any projects that we can run. We have a number of students that have to work on projects every year, and some of this we like them to work on live projects. So
yeah,
somebody might have a project that they're interested in developing, or something like that, or there's something that they want, or a problem they want solved. Let us help you in that front and see how we can engage our students with you on any of these projects or whatever. um, and plus, we have coming up very soon in March, we have our International Women in Food event. We do
brilliant.
that every year, where we invite uh, women from across Ireland to come together. It's really a networking event. It's about celebrating the women that work in this fabulous food and beverage industry. Um, and more importantly, allowing and creating a space for women to just get away from their businesses, chat,
Yeah,
network
so
in a
important.
fun environment that's not preachy or teachy. And I do that with Sally McKenna on the
Oh,
McKenna
gorgeous.
Guides every year. So we watch this space for news about that coming up as well in the next week or two. So that's on
Brilliant.
March the 8th. So again, that's just another forum. And we do have a lot of fora for various events like that right across the ATU. I know you're familiar with our entrepreneurship program that's run in our School of Science as well, which is another brilliant outreach
Yeah.
program for industry.
Yeah, I have to say my journey with food and business began in ATU, GMIT, and I cannot commend the people, like the team there, enough.
Mm,
The love, it's not an educational experience solely. You really become immersed in the industry, and
yes.
it's really where my I had always had a passion for food, but it's really where my obsession and
Yeah.
involvement. I'm
Yeah.
now unable to leave this industry because I've been touched by the magic of it and the people within it. And
Yeah.
just as you are encouraging people to reach out if they are in need, that's something I really, really do notice a lot. Business owners who may be struggling with something and just kind of are a little too overwhelmed that the thought of reaching out to somebody, it seems like they're bothering them. Don't
Not
ever.
at
This
all.
whole entire industry is built on the basis of connection. And so please do reach out to the team. Like, you'll always
No,
get
100%,
the benefit
100%.
of it.
And
Okay.
the other thing I would say as well, just as a by the way,
Yeah.
we get calls every year looking for students to come and work for the seasons. We have a links office, and again, I can provide you with the details for that. That works with industry for student placements and so on. But I'll put a but with that.
Yeah.
We will only we only want to work with those businesses that are going to mentor and take care of the young person that we're going to put out there.
Perfect.
So preferably somebody that works with that has a chef network charter in place,
Yeah.
somebody that has a good, I suppose, culture.
Hmm.
And again, and that is where you get the win-wins. So if anybody wants to work with us on that, we'll happily sit down and chat with anyone on that front.
Gorgeous. What a brilliant opportunity. Jacinta, thank you so much. You have been the perfect person to kick off Unite and Conquer, and I really, really, really appreciate you giving me your time. That's it for the first episode of Unite and Conquer. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Tune in next week where we'll be discussing another topic yet to be revealed.